Right, good afternoon members and members of the public. Welcome to the first meeting of the Manydown OSCOM. If we just run through very quickly the agenda. First of all, fire evacuation procedures. We're not expecting any fire alarms this afternoon, so if you do hear the fire alarm, we will assume that it is genuine and therefore we need to evacuate the building immediately. We go out through the fire exit at the rear of the room, down the back stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. We are being webcast, just so that you're all aware. I don't think we have any apologies for absence. Councillor Potter is here, I think I've seen him. Yes, here he is. No, that's fine. So no resignations and replacements. Any declarations of conflict of interest or whipping decisions? No? Oh, yes.
Could I just ask, I mean, the fact that all of this land is, or most of this land is largely in my ward, does that create a conflict of interest or that I have to disclose? I'm entitled to as much as anybody else because it's affecting my ward, but I just wanted to make sure whether I had to just say that it was, and the same would.
I'll just have a look at the officer and see if the officer wants to comment on that. Officer's advice is he will double check, John, just to make sure that you're okay. But where we're talking about here is sort of fairly broad brush strokes with the local plan rather than specific planning. He believes we're okay. Yes, Councillor Keating.
Well, on the basis that this OSCOM is intended to ensure that Manydown is developed, I'm sure that all members on the OSCOM will be supporting that particular concept. Would that be correct?
I can't personally speak for any other members of the OSCOM, Councillor Keating, but I think we're all here to ensure that we provide the best possible guidance for the Manydown development. That was my understanding of the brief. Right, if we can move on. No urgent items. We have no minutes, as this is the first meeting. Member and public participation. I believe we have one public speaker, Mr. Kearney. Mr. Kearney, when we get to the point in the agenda when you can come down, I will call you if that's all right. Standing invitation to relevant portfolio holders. We have Councillor Isaac with us, who will be introducing the paper when we get to that point. No referrals from committee or council, and no issues referred by the Cabinet. In a moment, Councillor Isaac and Richard Bailey, the officer, will introduce the report in front of us. If I can just draw your attention to a couple of things. If we look at the paper, if we go to recommendations on page 5 of 104, so paragraph 2.1 at the top of the page, we have, if we can bear this in mind during the afternoon, members, while we're deliberating, the idea is to consider and approve terms of reference, note progress made to date on draft vision and draft master plan, and then review and provide comments on the contents of this report, and comment on the changes to the local plan as well. So I propose that once we've been through the report, if we can perhaps take this in sections as per the recommendations, if everyone's okay with that. And part of the report, there is a supplementary which you should have, which is an update on changes from Cabinet, and that will form part of what we're looking at this afternoon. And then just a couple of other things. As Councillor Keating's already mentioned, we are here to consider the master planning. So I think we all obviously want to try and work together as much as we can and be hopefully as consensual as we can to bring forward the best possible solution for all our residents. So hopefully we can work on that basis. Also, if we can just be mindful, the report is written, again, if you go to page 9 of 104, at the end of paragraph 331, it's talking about the proposed response by the landowners to the changes the LPA is proposing to make. That, of course, is referring to changes to local plan at council, but of course that hasn't been decided yet. So although it's referring to changes that the LPA is proposing to make, that is whatever changes are brought in at council on Thursday, and we're obviously subject to that. And then finally, also, if we can just keep in mind with our deliberations that we are the Ofcom overseeing the landowning function rather than the planning function. So although I know there's an overlap, if we can try and keep our thoughts based on landowning rather than planning as much as we can. Okay, if everyone's happy, then we'll move over to Councillor Isaac and then to the officer.
Good afternoon. Firstly, as portfolio holder responsible for taking forward the Council's policy on the development of the Manydown land, I'm pleased that this special purpose Ofcom has been established. It seems to me vital that something as important as the development of the Manydown land is exposed to full public scrutiny. So I welcome that. I note the committee's terms of reference approved by the last full council, and that it should have responsibility for considering strategic landowner matters and for receiving and scrutinising material policy and financial issues of the Manydown project, and provide comments to the NEC, the Manydown Executive Committee, which is a subcommittee of Cabinet, on proposals and recommendations. As the Chairman has said, this is not a sort of rerun of the local plan debate. That is outside our remit and is going to be decided at full council on Thursday. So anything we say here is subject to that decision being taken at full council. At the outset, I would express the hope that we can work together, both formally and informally, in the same constructive and consultative manner that characterised the previous map for Manydown. Manydown is such an important issue in terms of the future housing needs of the borough and its relationship with existing communities. There was a lot of useful, constructive ideas that came out of the map, and I really do genuinely hope that that can continue. This report provides a summary of where matters currently stand as joint landowners. Remember, we're joint landowners with HCC. It addresses three key points: the proposed joint representations by Basingstoke and Deane and Hampshire County Council in their landowning capacities to the reconsultation of the Basingstoke local plan, which is due to take place between April 25th and June 13th. It also sets out the draft vision and master plan documents for Manydown, produced as supporting evidence to the local plan. And thirdly, it outlines the budget of 1.575 million made by Basingstoke and Deane and matched by Hampshire County Council to undertake the work to secure planning permission, which is really the role of this committee, to get us to the point where we've got planning permission, and then we may need to relook again at the governance. The Manydown Ofcom is asked to consider and comment on the proposed representations and the draft vision and master plan. Its views will be reported to the next Manydown Executive Committee, which takes place on April the 8th. At this point, I just want to say a few words about the draft vision and master plan. A great deal of work has gone into this by officers and the expert consultancy team appointed Beyond Green and URS, as well as members who contributed their valuable ideas through the map. There is a lot more to be done, and I look forward to working with members of this Ofcom in refining the proposals so they are sound and viable to go forward to achieve planning permission. I hope they will win the support of the people of Basingstoke and encourage them to get involved. We are committed to for the long term to ensure that we're creating a successful community for the future. Manydown is so important to the future of the borough. 3,400 new homes to 2029, representing 25% of the total required to be built. And that is why so much thought and effort has gone into putting together these initial principles and ideas. And I would emphasise they are initial. As a public body, we have a huge responsibility and a great opportunity here, given the scale of Manydown, to achieve a better, more desirable place for people to build their future. We want these principles to be enduring and at the heart of the long-term realisation of Manydown. Residents will be involved in the future development of the vision and will have chances to contribute their views, with 2 periods of public consultation planned during 2015. The aim is to create a number of new, attractive, sustainable and connected settlements at Manydown that fit in well with existing neighbouring communities and will provide everyone with better amenities. A priority is to ensure that homes planned are built to high standards with all the necessary supporting facilities and infrastructure in place. The design ideas in the vision centre around connected neighbourhoods that provide a wide range of choice of homes that allow residents to move within the community as their needs change. To make it easy for residents to access services and reduce reliance on the car, the vision of Manydown is designed around the principles of the walkable neighbourhood, ensuring that the majority of homes are located within a 5-minute walk of convenient shops, bus stops and other local services that are used daily. Combining the best features from Hampshire's villages and towns with contemporary sustainable design, the vision's principles set out to enable a high quality of life with lower environmental footprint, where residents will be able to walk or cycle to the local high street and to open countryside. A wide range of housing types, both private and affordable, including apartments, terraces, townhouses, semi-detached and detached houses, are envisaged. And the new Manydown will also offer opportunities for self-build homes, as well as extra care homes and residential care facilities. Homes will be built to modern environmental standards with an emphasis on achieving high standards of energy and water conservation. The design and layout of Manydown will integrate important existing landscape features, such as the woodland around Worthing Village. A new country park for the borough is proposed, with walking and cycling routes to provide attractive and easy connections to the wider countryside, including Winklebury, Butskin and Kempshott. A wide range of green spaces is central to the overall vision, varying in size and character from a large country park to urban squares and parks, allotments, gardens, green roofs and balconies. Green corridors would connect areas of woodland and other habitats to each other and the surrounding countryside. Core principle is that Manydown should maximise benefits not just for its new residents but also neighbouring communities, increasing accessibility to services and facilities. Where it meets the existing built edge of Basingstoke, the development will be respectful of neighbouring properties while seeking to optimise connections, particularly for walking and cycling. More public services and opportunities to work locally within Manydown figure prominently in the joint owners' plans. These include doctors' surgeries, community centres and schools, offices and workshops, as well as shops, all important to making Manydown a vibrant, successful place to live and work. And I've tried to outline there the prize that's available to us, given that we have the responsibility to provide the new homes for our growing population, and I hope that we can work together in the time ahead to achieve that. I'm now going to, Chairman, invite the lead officer to take us through the report and also to bring to your attention a supplementary report that arises from the Cabinet meeting of last week.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. Just to firstly recap on the report, the main report that you've got in front of you, and then also to reference the supplementary report that has been circulated today. First of all, there are 4 sections in the main report that I guess we'll get to when the committee looks at the recommendations. The first section refers to the terms of reference for the OSCOM for members to consider and vote upon. The second section looks at the revisions to the local plan, particularly in respect for the Manydown allocation and its policy and policies that are related to the Manydown development, and analyses those revisions. This was, as the Chair said, this was written about 2 weeks ago in the context of the officer's report that went to Cabinet, and therefore there have been some changes, as Councillor Isaac referred to, as a result of the Cabinet meeting last week, which are the subject of the supplementary report, which we'll take you through in a minute. The third section refers to the draft vision and the draft master plan, which are attached as Appendix 3 and Appendix 4 to this report, respectively. Both of these documents are drafts at this stage. They're designed as evidence for the local plan inquiry due later on this year, and there are initial or forerunners in the more detailed work that Councillor Isaac was referring to that we are due to undertake later on this year through into 2015, including detailed work for discussions with the local community and public consultations with the local community. And the fourth bit of the report, section 3.8, refers to the programme and the budget that's been devised and developed over the next 3 to 4 years to achieve planning permission, and has been jointly agreed with Hampshire, including the joint budget, and therefore the 1.575 million that's referenced in the report is matched by a similar amount for Hampshire in order for that work to be funded over the next 3 to 4 years to achieve planning permission. I'll take the main report as read, and therefore just draw your attention to the supplementary report. And in particular, the 3 policies that were subject to some revisions, proposed revisions at Cabinet on the 18th of March, which are due to be presented to full council this Thursday. And the 3 policy clauses that were subject to revisions that I wanted to highlight that are in the supplementary report, starting page 3 of 5, are policy clause M, for which we will rely on our original comments that are contained in the main paper. Policy clause N for November, for which we are suggesting, and this is a new policy clause that wasn't in the original list of Manydown policy clauses that were circulated to Council and Cabinet, but we are essentially suggesting an additional wording or addition of the words long-term in front of master planning in those 2 instances of the words master planning, to make it clear that the clause relates to an area of the allocation map that is out with of the initial allocation, the local plan period. So it's an improvement in the wording that we're suggesting there. And policy clause O, which has received some substantial changes since the officer's report clause wording for the Cabinet and therefore the full council. And there we'd like to suggest that the words permeability and the word optimise are reinstated into the drafting. And we'd also, I think more importantly, given what Councillor Isaac said, in terms of the way that we want to work with the local communities to make sure that Manydown is properly integrated with communities that are actually located around the outside of Manydown, including Winklebury and Oakley. We'd like to actually take as a point of principle in this clause, a principal objective is to ensure that quality of life is protected for existing residents as well as for new residents, and therefore there are a whole manner of things that we'd like to explore during the public consultation phases and discuss different forms of options during the detailed master planning phase with the communities that we think would achieve that. And there are a range of things that would achieve a higher quality of, or at least a similar quality of living for existing residents in the way that we could provide different design options to the treatment between Manydown and existing communities. And they would involve not just the way the roads are configured, but also the way the landscaping works and the way that access is provided or permeability is provided for existing residents into and out of Manydown to enjoy facilities that exist on Manydown or the other side of Manydown, in particular the country park. So we're saying, rather than being very specific about particular words, we'd like to actually look at the concept of quality of life and the concept of permeability in that clause and investigate that fully with the local communities concerned during the public consultation period in 2015. I think that probably concludes what I was going to say in terms of my description of the report.
Thank you. Councillor Keating, we will be talking about these changes as part of the paper. Is this something that you need to feed in now rather than hold it off until we actually come to talk about these a bit later on?
I don't have an O. You talked about M, N and O. I don't have an O in this paper. Have I got the right paper? What's on the... I assumed N went across the page and O would come underneath it. And perhaps I should have done.
Thank you, Councillor Keating. Councillor Potter.
Sorry, if you just bear with me. I'm sure everybody else understands this far better than I. In terms of where we are, I mean, in terms of the cabinet process last Tuesday, whenever it was, I mean, despite the sort of lack of collective responsibility that was displayed there, I mean, I presume that what we see before us today in this latest paper, as Richard has said, does demonstrate, you know, the latest revisions that Cabinet are putting forward in regard to the draft local plan. What I wanted to be clear about on our own paper under page 10 of 104, which is obviously under the sort of preamble of the table below, sets out a summary of comments that officers propose to make in the joint submission on the Manydown policy wording to be made during the reconsultation on the revised local plan. And there's a whole sequence of things there. Is it before us today for us to go through those and approve all of those and determine whether we agree with those officer observations? I mean, I see Richard, you're frowning, but I mean, it's simply to understand the process. I'm not making a commentary about whether I agree or not with these. It's just the process I want to be clear about in regard to where we are. I mean, Cabinet at its meeting said some things that gives rise to these revisions. We've got this paper in front of us that gives officer observations which they suggest would be a change to what we've had originally go into the reconsultation process. And does it fall to this OSCON to say, yes, we're happy with that, or no, we're not? That's all I'm asking, please.
You turn it off, right? Okay. My understanding, Councillor Potter, is that the Cabinet made its decision in relation to the local plan, and its recommendation was to proceed with the amendments agreed at Cabinet. This committee, I think, is entitled, as part of its scrutiny, to make comments that will go forward to the subcommittee of the Cabinet, the MEC, but those comments are outside of any decisions in relation to what is ultimately decided by full council in relation to the local plan.
I mean, it's just a sequence of all of this, if I may. I mean, clearly, this revised draft local plan is going before full council on Thursday evening, isn't it? And I'm trying to get clear in my head what format, in respect of Manydown, that will take following A, the Cabinet process, B, what we may say today, and see how that, you know, features within anything that goes before the full council on Thursday evening as the draft local plan for approval or rejection by council on Thursday evening. I mean, does that sequence work? That's all I'm trying to establish.
Yeah, I think, again, to repeat what I said earlier, the two are distinct, actually. There will be opportunities in full council to make comments in relation to the draft local plan, but what we're here today to do is to make comments to the MEC as the landowner body, which will inform the policies that are taken forward by the MEC in future, but they're quite distinct from the local plan.
Okay, you're happy with that, Councillor Potter? Councillor Keating?
The supplementary paper talks about the cabinet conclusions or cabinet input, but am I right in thinking that 3 members of the cabinet actually decided all this out of a cabinet of 10, 9 or 10? 3 members of the cabinet, is that correct?
Again, I think we're straying into local plan issues. That was a fully fully constituted cabinet. Obviously, there are certain members of the cabinet who are excluded by virtue of the fact that they are on the MEC. So the cabinet, by majority, has voted for the to bring forward the draft local plan with the amendments that were proposed by the portfolio holder last week.
If I may, Chair, the only point I make is when you're talking about local government and you're talking about cabinet, it kind of gives the impression that the whole of the cabinet or a significant part of it are making decisions. In this particular case, my understanding is 3 of the cabinet, 3 members of the cabinet have made these decisions. Now, I think that that's very, very difficult to sustain an argument that the cabinet has decided anything when only 3 of them were there to make a decision. But I leave that point in the air because I'm sure we are not competent of making any other decision on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keating. I think you made your point, but you will obviously have the opportunity on Thursday to express that further if you wish. I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will, Councillor Keating. Before we move on to our public speaker, if I can just draw everyone's attention, we have a guest with us. This is Hannah. Oh, she's gone, actually. She was here. This is Hannah, who's with us on work experience, so she's here to observe the workings of the committee today. So, Mr. Kearney, if you're happy to come forward. Thank you. If you want to sit down by a microphone, Mr. Kearney, you have the usual 2 minutes.
I'm Mr. John Kearney. I'm interested in this Winklebury situation because I used to be a councillor at Winklebury. Now the thing is this, that I've been looking at Winklebury and the difficulties of the roads. Now you have 3 exits into Basingstoke. You have the Newbury Road, the Winklebury Way Road, and that horse and cart tunnel down at Worthing. I was looking at the plan, you're planning a park to the north, but surely you should be building houses there to encourage the traffic, which will be quite substantial, onto the Newbury Road. See, Winklebury will be smaller than Manydown as far as population is concerned, and we don't want traffic running around Winklebury Way. And indeed, There will have to be an access to Winklebury Way, but I think Winklebury Way will have to be changed at the far end so there's a straight road into the town rather than going up and going round a zigzag. But the thing is we must protect the people of Winklebury. And that's why the Newbury Road access is so vital. Another point, the park at the north, no. The park at the south, because there is a little village there called Worting, which nobody seems to care about. And if you have a park there and the homes further up, it will give them a decent space, and then maybe the little village life can carry on. And as for the Horse and Cart Tunnel, already coming down Rolling Road, the traffic from Winklebury is bad enough turning into that Worting Road to go to the Horse and Cart Tunnel. But if you have, say, another 4,000 cars, it's going to be hell. So basically, there's an awful lot you've got to think about as far as roads are concerned. Now, I said 3,400, you might manage. 6,000 houses in the future, sorry. Unless you have this western bypass, which they're talking about, then forget it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kenny, and thank you very much for keeping more or less to your 2 minutes as well. Members, if we can then move on to the recommendations on page 5 of 104. So if we... Councillor Keating.
Could we have a period of questions, please?
Yes, Councillor Keating, that's what I was going to suggest. You preempted me. I was going to suggest that we consider our deliberations in 3 sections. So if we start with looking at the terms of reference, if you have any questions on that, otherwise if you have any points. So if we look at that first of all, does anyone have any questions or any points on the terms of reference at all? Councillor Keating.
As you may know, but it is worth saying, I have always been a supporter of the development of Manydown, and I continue to be, and that's the only reason I'm on this committee. Secondly, the money raised by the sale of council houses back in 1995-96 was substantially part of the money used to purchase Manydown. Not all of it, but an awful lot of it. When it talks on the first bullet point on the terms of reference, it talks about the strategic landholding interests of BDC being protected. My concern is the protection of that landholding element into the future, because it is not clear to me if it is intended under these overall proposals to actually sell the land and to not retain any control thereafter. So that's the first element of question which arises in my mind from bullet point number 1 of the terms of reference. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you. I don't know whether the officer or portfolio holder would like to comment on that.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Keating. As I said in my opening remarks, we're in, as I see it, as portfolio holder, we're in it for the long term. So you and I, we've discussed this, and I'm quite clear that we have a responsibility as owners of public land to ensure that anything we do here is done well, and that will involve ensuring that we've got the right levers to ensure whoever our partners are in the future who undertake the development of the land do it as we would want. We're not about building housing estates.
If I may clarify, would that therefore require us to ensure that we retained some element of control or ownership of the land after the houses have been built and the developers moved on? Would we still have some control of the arrangements?
There's a lot of work that's still to be done on that, and you know, this is something that I look forward to working with this committee on. But you and I went to Poundbury, and we saw that an example there of how it's possible to work with the private sector and yet still maintain standards and guidelines that are respected and enduring for years ahead. And I personally was very positively influenced by that example, but there's a lot of work to be done yet.
Thank you for that. Can I ask a next question, please? Now, we're talking here about the strategic landholding interests of Manydown. I'm unclear from reading these documents, and perhaps it's me rather than anyone else, whether or not that element of plot 5, which includes the ridge by the Manydown farm, whether or not the line which was originally further away towards Wootton St. Lawrence and was brought forward towards the farm by Councillor Ruffle, where is that line now in these documents, please? Could you clarify? Thank you.
Two parts to the answer. First of all, the landowner's position has and continues to be that the allocation boundary that we would prefer and would require in order to deliver the amount of houses that the local plan requires Manydown to deliver would be the western land boundary. And following our response to the consultation back in October, the officers, as I now understand it, have allocated the boundary to the western boundary for Manydown, and that, if you look at appendix it's actually page 60 of 104 in the 60 of 104. If you look at that map, that is the Manydown site allocation that is being proposed by officers, and indeed was confirmed as part of the cabinet discussion on the 18th of March, and is therefore in front of full council for inclusion in the revised draft local plan. So that western boundary, which includes the black cross hatching, is what we as landowners have asked for, and we understand is going to be included in the local plan, revised local plan for consultation following full council, subject to any debate that appears at full council.
Thank you. That clarifies for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keating. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I've actually got a comment rather than a question. Is that okay? Right, I just feel I need to say something. My misgivings about this whole development are fairly well known. But as landowners, I obviously do appreciate that we are going to be developing an area of this land, and we want it to be as good as we possibly can, and that's fine. But I just want to look at the second term of reference, which was taking regard of the proper planning of the area, which was the original the original reason for purchasing this in the first place. And I feel that by attrition we are moving farther and farther away from this. And I appreciate the hard work that's been done by Mr. Bailey and his team, and I'm sure you've worked within your own remit. But as the landowners and responsible, obviously we are responsible to our residents. I think that we need to look again at what we mean by the proper planning of Basingstoke, which to me should be the amenity of existing residents, the protection of our villages, and good design with due consideration for all necessary infrastructure. And we've gradually come to view Manydown over the last few months as a golden egg that can be used to fulfil all of our requirements for housing. And it's almost like the so-called, now we need more housing, oh, we've still got Manydown. And it's almost like everything now is being sucked towards Manydown. And once again, that attitude to me is not what we call good and proper planning for Basingstoke. And I think there's a clamour for us to use this land now. Originally, when we were first looking at developing it as landowners, because I was in the EPP meeting, we fairly unanimously, I think, suggested north of the railway line and west of the ridge line, which was still a very, very large plot of land that had potential to be very nicely developed and could east of the ridge line. Thank you, Councillor. Right, to the right of the ridge line as you look at it. I'm sorry. Geography isn't my strong point. But we could have delivered a fantastic estate there and really good houses, and a lot of them as well. But because we've got to now find more and more houses because some of the sites are being closed down elsewhere, it's all being lumped into Manydown. We've had to extend beyond the ridge line, as Councillor Keating was, below the railway line. And it's also that we can have different areas of construction so that we can do it quickly as well. None of this sounds to me as if it's for the proper planning of Basingstoke. And I won't go into more detail about it. I might speak later on that when we come to specific areas. But these are my broad thoughts. And as I say, whilst I'm very happy that we should be looking at it properly as landowners and produce something, it is getting out of hand. And I've got serious reservations about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Yes.
Just respond to that. Obviously, Councillor Taylor, I realise the difficulties you face, given the ward you represent. I'm struggling, though, when I hear comments like that, to understand how we can provide for the amenities, protect the villages, and also build 3,400 homes. I'm not a magician. We have a responsibility here to provide additional homes for our growing population. And if we don't do it, somebody else is going to take responsibility away from us. So I think that what we are embarked on here is the proper planning and realisation of the Manydown land. But I will welcome your input in future into making sure that, having been given this responsibility, that we do it as well as possible and do respect the interests of your residents.
Thank you. And the point I'm making is simply that maybe we shouldn't be trying to build quite so many houses as 3,400 on this bit of land at this time. I think we can do it better if we don't clamour to build quite so many. Thank you.
I think that in response to that, in how the proposed allocation of housing has come about, that is a process that is the local plan process. We're responding to that as landowner.
Just say that the local plan should cover the whole borough, and it is sucking very, very much now towards the west of town. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Leake.
Thank you, Chairman. For the avoidance of doubt in Councillor Keating's mind, I'm not opposed to the development of Manydown. So I am here to work constructively. But my point was, again, to be exactly the same, relating to the proper planning of the area, because it says the area in which the land is situated. I would like that to be amended to is situated and the surrounding area, because the impact on Winklebury, for instance, or indeed the villages in my ward, namely Wootton, St Lawrence, Monk Sherburn, even out as far as Ramsdell, that is going to have a very significant impact. And to me, planning is not just the houses there, it's the impact on the roads, the lanes, and everything else. So I would like it to be drawn a little wider so that we do remember the implications for those who actually live in the rural areas as well as those who live in the urban areas, and I hope members would support that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to look at the officer for that.
Thanks, Councillor Leake, and we absolutely recognise that any development of Manydown will need to work with, and we'd need to talk to residents, existing residents that are located in and around Manydown as we develop this. And as I think both Councillor Isaac and myself indicated earlier, we're going to have a proper process during 2015 where we want to actually talk to you about and the residents about different options for how Manydown integrates within the area. The wording that's in that bullet point is absolutely a straight lift from the Town and Country Planning Act, and whilst absolutely we need to work with the residents in making sure we integrate Manydown in a proper fashion, there will be some things that we as landowners can do and some things that the borough itself would do, namely for things that are off our land holding. The borough itself will be a proper body to be able to achieve certain aspects that may be required in terms of the proper integration of Manydown within its existing communities.
I hear what you say, but I would still ask that members support the view I've expressed. I mean, if one takes the lane down to Wootton St Lawrence, which is immediately adjacent to the western side of the development, or the northern side, western side, there is a significant impact there. And will that lane be used, for instance, for access to the country park? I think we have to be a bit broader than just looking at this. I'm just asking that we don't just look at this piece of land, we look at the implications for a slightly wider area, which is without doubt going to be impacted. If you dump 3,500 houses anywhere, it does have implications beyond the bit of land. So I would ask that we broaden this slightly. Thank you.
Councillor Potter.
I mean, I just think we've got to be very careful, all of us, in terms of the language that we use over this. I mean, it's worth, isn't it, reminding ourselves, not in the terms of reference, but the council policy on this, I think dating back to 2012, is to actively promote the development of Manydown, and it's been a tortuous process to get to where we are. I mean, with respect to colleagues, I hate words like, if we're going to dump 3,500 houses anywhere. I mean, it sets the scene in a way that I really, quite frankly, despair of. And also, I think words like, which I've heard today, about protecting the people of Winkleberry. I mean, we've said, and I hope it's not just for the sake of it, Manydown could be an exemplar. It can actually provide an exemplary housing development. And I think it's about time, if we're all committed to this, by the way, and not just here on some destructive agenda, that we start promoting the benefits that can flow from Manydown. And certainly the people of Winkleberry can benefit hugely from a properly developed Manydown site with all of the interplay that can go on between those developments. Some of the benefits that could flow to Winkleberry from this exemplary development should not be understated, and it's about time we started to talk in those terms. I mean, the language, which isn't just used by a member of the public today, but used by some of our own members about protecting the people of Winkleberry, is quite frankly misleading and unacceptable. And I heard some of it used at Cabinet the other night as well. Well, I despair of that group anyway. But we've got to start moving this into, I think, a very positive agenda. I hope we're all committed to it. I know what Councillor Taylor said in the past. Perhaps she'll move from that position progressively as we move into the master planning stage, and officers here more skilled than I are able to present to her a case for the real master planning element of this, which is going to make this a development like no other in Basingstoke, and hopefully like no other in the country. But we've got to start working with that positive agenda, and I want to see some examples of that, please.
Councillor Tilbury.
Just to say, Charles, I'm supportive of what John's saying, but I think if you read the actual sentence, it says, the last part is, which was the proper planning of the area in which the land is situated. So it implies that we're talking about the Manydown land within the area. Well, I assume that means the wider area. I mean, if you could put the word wider area in there, that might change it there, but it's yeah, I was going to say, I think it's implicit to me the way I read it, but I think the problem is other people may read it differently, and clearly you have. I mean, that's how I read it, though, if that makes sense to anyone. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tilbury. Councillor Leek, you would be happy if we inserted wider into that sentence, so the wider area.
Yes. Thank you.
I'm just looking at the office there on this.
Yes, I understand where that's coming from, John. The only comment I'd make is, again, can we just remind ourselves that we are here as the landowner body, and therefore we are constrained by our own ownership.
So I understand that, but at the end of the day, some of the decisions that will be taken will have an impact, and that impact outside the site on which we may wish to make planning decisions. I'm sure the county will want to make some decisions about the Roman Road roundabout, and actually the Roman Road roundabout isn't actually in the site. It's external to the site. I'm just saying it needs to cover a bit more than the boundary shown on this map. That's all I'm asking, to make sure we don't forget about the other implications.
Understood. And I think if you look at the report, there are a number of instances where we refer to respecting the interests of neighbouring communities, and I'm foursquare behind that.
Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also conscious that when we went to the High Court didn't say you have to develop some of Manydown, a part of Manydown. It says you bought Manydown for the purposes of developing it. So I'm hesitant to accept people now pretending that the High Court said only develop half of it, or only develop a bit of it. It didn't say that. It says you bought Manydown, it's 8,000 acres, and you bought it to develop it. You need to get on and do it. Thank you.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. I think the evidence is before us in repeatedly in parts of the paper that that we all do share the concerns in part that have been raised by Councillors Taylor and Leek, that whatever we do in influencing the development of Manydown has to be done with proper account of the impact that it will have on surrounding areas. Don't think there is any difference between any of us on that. But I just suggest that we go back to what we're looking at as the terms of reference, and to say that the objective for which we purchased the land was that section of the Town and Country Planning Act, and the proper planning of the area in which the land is situated is, as we've heard, a direct quote from the Act. We're not going to change the Act here, so I think we can be content that the marker is down for our wish to have good and careful regard to the impact on the lanes and the surrounding communities. But I don't believe we need to change the wording in the in our terms of reference in order to do it.
Thank you. Any further, Councillor Taylor?
Yes, could I just say that I wasn't suggesting that we change the wording in our terms of reference. I'm just saying that I don't feel we're working within those terms of reference, and that's what we submit should be more closely within the terms of reference. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further points or comments or questions on terms of reference, can we then, therefore, as in the recommendation, approve terms of reference and meeting frequency? Is everyone happy with that? consider and approve the terms of reference and the meeting frequency. Top of page 5 of 104, Councillor Keating. Are we agreed on that, committee?
And despite what Councillor Mrs. Baker says, whatever the Act says, I don't always accept what the government imposes on us, and I'm unhappy about it, and I really do think we should be looking at the wider area, and I would like that to be recorded. But I do accept that the Act probably does say what it does, but many Acts are rather idiotic anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Leake. If there are no further points, can that be recorded?
Individual comments can't be recorded. However, your statement on webcast will be listed.
I would like it recorded, please, otherwise I'm leaving this meeting. And I should certainly then be voting against. It's up to you.
Councillor Keating.
If members of this committee want things recorded, they have a right to request it, and officers do not have a right to reject those requests. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think it's agreed that it will be recorded. Thank you. Right, thank you, committee. If we can move on to 2.1, the second recommendation, which is to note progress made to date on the draft vision and draft master plan. So if anyone has any questions or comments, I suggest we can take questions and comments together on the draft plan and vision and master plan. Lots of hands up. Councillor Tucker.
Ooh, makes noises. I just wanted to check that you're taking 2 and 3 together then, are you? Guess she said, and comments. She did.
No, if we are talking about number 2, we're talking about the draft vision and draft master plan. We're noting the progress, so obviously if anyone wants to make any comments on that, or if anyone has any questions, then we'll move on to the final section, which will be the local plan considerations.
So, if we have comments on what is in something or suggestions, when would you like me to say it?
If it's a comment on the vision and master plan, we can have that now. If it's a comment on the local plan, as in our comments or on the supplementary report, we'll take that as the final item.
Can I say what it is, and then you can tell? There are 2 comments regarding sewerage, and I'd like to just make a comment. One, it is suggested that we might be able to expand the works at Manydown Lane, which worries me enormously at the moment, in that there is such a lot of groundwater or surface water draining off that area onto the road, which I'm having people look at. So I just wanted to flag that up. It could be a problem. And the other thing where sewerage is concerned, it was suggested that perhaps we could have a new plant, or whatever they're called, on the left-hand side, on the 340 at the beginning going in. It seemed to me that it would be standing there looking as ugly as could be. It didn't seem to me a very sensible suggestion. It might be practical, but not necessarily very nice to look at.
Thanks, Councillor Tucker. Taking your 2 points. First of all, when we get to the time that we discuss with Southern Water, who are the owners and operators of the Manydown Lane plant, then we'll pick your point up then with them. In terms of the on-site potential location for a sewage farm to serve Manydown and the surrounding areas, that at the moment is still being looked at in terms of its feasibility. We believe that technically it's feasible, but we need to look at some business issues around business modelling issues to see whether it's deliverable. The actual location, though, we've put in the master plan north of the Worting Road, sorry, so it's south of the Worting Road, but north of the railway line in the location you've highlighted. Actually, it probably doesn't have to go there. It could, and we've made references to this in the strategic gap comments around the strategic gap policy. We could locate it in the southern half of the the area south of the railway line. So at this point in time, it's been put there as a kind of indicator to the inspector that we are capable, technically capable of providing sewerage facilities for our own development should that be necessary. In terms of its location on the overall Manydown site, there is an option, or there are options to put it south of the railway line if that were preferable. And of course that would then be that's why we've made that point, that would then be within the current strategic gap.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Leek.
I'm assuming I can comment on things. Is that correct? I don't just have to ask a question. Right. Well, I've said that in principle I support the development. My concerns all relate to roads and traffic. I start with really the local plan, if I may say, may start there. I know that's sort of outside our remit, but for the past 2 or 3 years, I've sat on endless meetings of P&I, and we've referred to link roads and a bypass, or possibility of a bypass, it was only at the 11th hour that references to the link road seemed to disappear. My vision of the link road was something that ran along the western edge of this development and would be a road which could carry traffic from the A339 to the B3400, largely unhindered, other than that there may be traffic lights at certain points to enable the anybody accessing the new development or exiting the new development to join that link road. Now, that appears to have disappeared at the 11th hour, as I said. Now, when I read this piece of paper, we get there's a degree of confusion here, because sometimes they refer to a link road and sometimes they refer to a spine road. And I think we've got to decide whether it is a link road or whether it's a spine road. I think, looking at it, we're talking about a spine road, and I think all references to link roads should be removed. I disagree with that, but I don't think a link road isn't something through a development, in my view. That is a spine road. And there are many bad examples of spine roads in this town. One's only got to look at Oxford Road through Merton Rise and Marnell Park. Very bad examples, and traffic does try to flow through there, but it can't flow very well. My real concern is the massive amount of traffic which travels from what I call the Trumpet roundabout up to the Roman Road roundabout in the evening, and then disappears to the left down Roman Road. And I had always assumed that Roman Road would somehow be narrowed because that was in the interests of the Winklebury residents. That may not be the case, so the officers can tell me what is intended. And therefore, if the traffic wasn't going down this Roman Road, that it would travel down the link road, and it'd be relatively unhindered, because there is a vast amount of traffic that does that every single evening. And there will be a lot of additional traffic as a result of this development. So I would really like to know what is intended for Roman Road. If it is to remain a sort of main thoroughfare and traffic can flow freely, that's fine. Then maybe we don't need the link road, but what I don't want to find is that Roman Road becomes, has traffic calming features, and so does the spine road, such that you cannot travel easily, because I know the outcome of that. It will be that everybody will want to go through Wootton St Lawrence from the Little Lake. And that's the bit that I'm really determined that we don't allow. So I would like us to agree whether we've got a spine road or whether we've got a link road, simplify it, call it one or the other, but don't call it both, and assure me as to what will be the main means of traffic flowing from the A339 to the B3400, because there is an enormous amount of it, particularly from 4 o'clock in the afternoon till about 6:30. Where it all goes, I haven't a clue. I haven't bothered to follow it. But I assure you, it gets to the Roman Road roundabout and it turns left. So that's my sort of starting point. If we could discuss that, and I would like to come back with a comment on the bypass, but I've got lots of other comments.
If I can respond to the general point about spine roads, link roads, there's been some preliminary technical work done on highways, but there's a lot more to be done. That's the starting point. But it is central to the vision that we have for the Manydown communities that the link road will serve those communities, but also serve the wider area. But the idea is that traffic will move through it rather slowly, so that there won't be the encouragement for people to take shortcuts through it. That's very core to what we have in mind for Manydown. And our position on that was made clear in our original responses to the draft local plan back in September/October. So it's not an 11th hour change. As far as terminology is concerned, I'm happy to listen to the views of the committee in relation to what we should describe these roads as. I've no proprietary interest in what they're called. As to your question, Councillor Leake, in relation to Roman Road, I'm going to sort of look to the officer to respond to that one, if I may.
And really, just, Councillor, to take you to the earlier statement I made about sitting down with the local communities and looking at different options. And what I'm keen to do, particularly in the section of the area around Manydown and Winklebury and Roman Road that you're referring to, is actually to sit down with the communities and look at different options for how we develop Manydown and how Roman Road is used in that overall development in a manner that protects quality of life for the existing residents and allows permeability as well for the existing residents. And so that's my overriding objective right now. We would prefer to do that in the public consultation stages, and therefore first and foremost in 2015 to actually discuss a range of options with the communities around how Roman Road works with, or different options for Roman Road with the development, and then latterly to actually sit down with the residents and look at a preferred option from that initial consultation, that initial discussion. And so really I would want to focus on that process and look at what the art of the possible is to achieve a quality of life and permeability, and really deal with it through that process.
If I may, Chairman, that doesn't really answer my question. I mean, when we started the process, we were talking about the possibility of Western bypass. I'm happy to accept that the need for such a bypass has actually not really been proved. But a single carriageway link road, as opposed to a dual carriageway bypass, seemed to me to be a good halfway house. Now we are being told that during the planned period, there may be discussions about the possibility of a Western bypass. I don't know whether any of you have actually looked at a plan. Would it be impossible, actually, to put in a Western bypass that didn't destroy either Wootton St Lawrence or Tangier Park or the Moles Hanger estate or the AONP? If we lose the chance to put in what I still refer to as the link road, which is a suitable highway, which is relatively unhindered in terms of traffic, which would be acceptable to me instead of a western bypass. If we lose that opportunity, we've lost it forever. And that, I think, is a great pity, because I had always understood that is what the P&I committee was really looking for. And now I don't know whether Roman Road is going to provide that. I do know that there will be a spine road which will be very slow, so that won't be very attractive. And I'm left with my concerns about Wootton St. Lawrence, the lane through Wootton St. Lawrence, because traffic will go through there to get to Oakley, to get to Overton, or to Whitchurch, or whatever, because people will move, and they will move at speed. The idea that we're all going to get on a bicycle is nonsense. We know that people still drive. And I am very concerned about it, and I really would like to know which road is going to be the main thoroughfare for unhindered traffic, so that I can make a decision as to whether or not I support this or support the local plan on Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keating. Councillor Potter, then you're next.
I mean, if I may, Chair, just going back to the sort of recommendations that are before us anyway, I mean, I did want to say, under the heading of notes the progress made to date on the draft vision and draft master plan, I mean, I note that, and I'm pleased to see genuinely the work that's been done on that. I think it is worth saying, you know, what a good and substantial document this is, really. I mean, I think it reads very well. I mean, I do commend it for as wide as public circulation as possible, really, because I think it contains a whole series of proposals, and I think philosophical some of them may be, really, which I think we would, certainly I would associate with. And that's some of the things I said originally about the way that Manydown can realise its potential, not just for its own benefit, but for adjoining communities, shouldn't be underestimated. And I think we need to come back to that time and again. And I think also the statement about, as landowner and public bodies, Hampshire County Council and Basingstoke and Deane are uniquely positioned to invest in to create long-term value, I think is important as well, because this is the sort of approach that I think we've got to promote. I mean, I don't want to be too theoretical about it, but I mean, certainly I've always been concerned about the concept, and I know what Councillor Leake says, of a bypass that actually encourages people to avoid Manydown like the plague. I've said it elsewhere. I want to see a development which is, as I've said, exemplary, that encourages people to visit it. I want it to have a road, a spine road, that actually encourages people to move through the development from district centre to district centre, and actually creates a vibrancy and an activity in Manydown. It's not going to be some blight on the landscape in this corner of Basingstoke that's avoided by people. I want it to be the opposite. Now,
and I note the first bullet point on the constraint, which says that the density may not be sufficient, have a sufficient enough heat load to make decentralized energy, combined heat and power, for example, viable. And but I hope it would still be considered. Let's not assume right from the start that it's not going to be viable. And there is then, on the key opportunities, I'm quite happy that best opportunities are taken with the layout and orientation to support low energy building, but I hope that would include the optimization of the chance of having solar roofs. We may have elsewhere in the document reference to the possibility of a solar farm on other land within the same ownership, but to my mind that's not always the best use of agricultural land. And if we're creating structures with roofs, let's put roofs with south-facing slopes so that we can have solar roofs. To me, the best place to have a solar panel is on a roof, on a building, rather than on on farmland. And we'll all make a note in our diaries. Councillor Leek and I are in full agreement on this point. Yes, note it in the minutes, please. And then, just being pernickety, on page 21 of that document, the site analysis has the diagram of the site and lists all of the key shows us which pieces of land are which, but the key also includes local centres, schools, out-of-town retail parks, which aren't actually shown on the plan. Now, I just find that irritating, and would hope that if we think we want to include those on the master plan, and I think they are useful things to include on the master plan, then let's actually have them on the plan, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Just looking to see whether the officer has any comments on that, and you're just writing vigorously now. Right. Next we have Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Agree with everything that Mrs. Baker said. I would have said exactly the same myself. Why use up a field when you've got all those roofs, 3,500 roofs you can put solar tiles on? But I actually put my hand up when we were talking about roads, so if I might just return to that at the moment. Could we agree that we've moved to section 3, really, haven't we? We've all noted the progress, and it's very good progress, even though I don't agree with it at all. I have to agree that it's good progress has been made and it's a good document. But we're kind of commenting on everything now, aren't we, and asking questions. So we're on section 3. Is that right?
We are, but we just got to bear in mind we have to return to comment also on the proposed changes to the local plan and the update paper. But we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay, I suppose this is a bit of each, really. Just returning to Councillor Leek's comment about where is the traffic going to go. I'm very puzzled, because if we're going to have a slow-moving spine road and we're not going to have a western bypass, I don't see there's any point in saying we're going to look at possibilities for Winklebury. The only possibility is for all the traffic going southwards to go down the Roman Road, and if it wants to get to the motorway, to go under the bridge that Mr. Keeney was talking about, down Buckskin Lane, through Kempshott, and then switch to the A30, and that's where all the traffic has to go, surely. There's no other place for it to go unless it goes through the country lanes. So I don't see how we can say that we're going to look at possibilities unless we provide them with a possibility. There is no other possibility at all.
Speak now or hold your peace.
I don't know if anybody wants to comment now, or if shall I just continue on the road situation as well?
What I was proposing earlier is that we will look at the whole of the traffic issues when we look at the detailed master planning. I think it's probably, as Councillor Potter says, that's the appropriate time to do it.
Well, if I could just help you there. I noticed that we were talking before, and I noticed in here that there's the possibility at some stage of connecting the two sides, the north and the south of the proposed allocated area, by going over the railway lines at the Battledown flyover at some stage. Is that right? Otherwise, 6A, the triangle of land to the south of the railway line, is going to be very, very isolated. And it's going to be isolated anyway, actually, because if you've got a flyover, unless you've got a lift there, you're not going to get down from it onto your housing estate, are you? It just puzzles me, if you're talking about such major engineering works as to have a road going over two railway lines, why you don't clear the space so that, not build houses right up, so that you've got room there to actually build a bigger road at some stage in the future. It seems very, very nearsighted to only leave room for a little spine road, when that actually, we've always agreed, is the ideal place for a bypass if it does come, and if it does cross over from north to south of the railway lines.
I think there were two questions there. One is in relation to plot 6A, which is located south of the railway line, and what we've said in our submission is that we believe that that could be brought forward as a standalone site. Therefore, running off the back of what the local authority have done in relation to their traffic assessment for that site, we'd be accessing it from the east into 6A. So that would be the plan for 6A within the local plan period. The second point relates to the longer term, and clearly time outside or beyond the local plan period of 2029. Now, if I draw your attention to page 28 in the master planning document. Okay, you'll see the indicative layout on the right-hand side. You'll also see some pink areas either side of the railway line, very close to where the bridge or the tunnel, sorry, underneath the Pat Lane tunnel underneath the railway line is, and that's exactly what we're proposing to do. In other words, safeguarding those areas should there be a need to put a tunnel or a bridge over the railway line at some future point beyond the local plan period.
But just to clear up, are you safeguarding an area that's big enough for a proper trunk road to go through?
We're safeguarding an area that's big enough to put a bridge or a tunnel over the railway line.
But not a bypass?
That's something that hasn't been determined yet, and is really part of the studies that Hampshire are looking at in terms of route alignments, whether or not the potential western bypass alignments do come through Manydown. There may be other options with a Manydown, and indeed what size of road is required in terms of that potential western bypass if it does come through Manydown. So at this stage we've got no information, and it isn't something that Manydown requires in terms of a ability to service the land within the local plan period. So we're safeguarding an area big enough to put a tunnel or a bridge over the railway line, and we're waiting for those studies to complete.
Yes, sorry to ask you again, but if it proves that if it comes forward in these studies, or whatever, that it is desirable to at least have land allocated if there's a need for a western bypass, would you preserve enough land at the Battledown flyover in order to provide that, for instance, big enough for dual carriageway?
The areas either side at the moment are compatible with most sizes of roads in the context of the western bypass of Basingstoke.
Could I just ask one more? One of the reasons I ask that is that on one of these pages, I'm just trying to see where it is, there's a green area allocated protecting Oakley, which is shrunk to about a third the size of the strategic gap. And it just occurs to me that maybe that's paving the way in future plans to find room for a bypass to whiz straight past the eastern edge of Oakley. Is this right?
I probably need to know which plan you're referring to.
Page 23 of the URS document. There's a hatched little green line going along the eastern edge of Oakley.
Okay, so this is the kind of lighter green hatching. Well, that's west of the area of land we were just talking about, and that's, as you rightly say, right next to Oakley, and that's just indicative at this stage in terms of how we would want to sort of look at a future date beyond the local plan period, a proper landscaping border to maintain that or prevent that coalescence between the western edge of Manydown and Oakley.
So sorry about this, but that means we're abandoning the strategic gap basically, and we're sort of saying we can have a road running through it or housing there if necessary. Have we abandoned the strategic gap altogether?
No, and the response to the strategic gap, which policy which is outlined page 12 of 104, we're pretty clear in our response that we're respecting the strategic gap within the local plan period, and therefore But also, I think, just to reference my earlier point about potential enabling infrastructure like the potential sewage farm, so outwith of the odd potential enabling infrastructure, some strategic landscaping outwith of that, then within the local plan period, we're saying quite clearly we'd honour the strategic gap outwith of the allocation area.
Presumably, as mere landowners here, it's not our decision anyway in relation to the strategic gap. It's the policy of the full council as the planning authority. So we are subservient.
Could I just ask, do the committee understand what I'm trying to say? That if we're going to have the major engineering works of a little spine road going over the railway line, we might just as well make sure we clear enough space to make it the crossing for a main road. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I have Councillor Tilbury and then Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Chair. It is on, yeah. Yeah, I know. If you go to the map on page 88 of 104, I mean, I think the point's been made by Councillor Leake earlier about the spine road. I mean, he sort of suggests that you didn't know where the cars go. Well, I can tell him where they go. They haven't been stuck in the traffic. They go to Oakley, over and then probably then on to Whitchurch, and possibly Andover, I would guess. But that traffic isn't going to go away, so you've still got to deal with that. But overlaid on that, you're going to have any traffic generated by Manydown. So if that even if that carries on going down the Roman Road, as it does at the moment there, no sooner as Manydown will generate its own traffic, a lot of them will probably be going in the same directions as the traffic which has come from probably Reading that direction. They're heading that way, or to the north of Basingstoke if people work that way. They're all going to come through, and at some point they come to the new Manydown Centre on the smack bang on the B3400, where they've now negotiate what is effectively a large sort of village centre there. Well, it's bad enough in Overton at 5 o'clock, but we've already lost the traffic that's gone off to Oakley, and Oakley is fortunate it's all one side of the B3400 in the way. They all go off down that way down there. So you know, you can see this is going to be a bit chaotic there, because the traffic already stretches all the way round that bit that loops round the back of the bit of the Roman Road that's gone loopy round there before it goes. That's at Roman Way. I can think of the name of it. The loop part there, the newer part of it there. It's gone all round there already. It's going to be further constrained by the fact that the traffic's building backing back from the other one there. It seems like, you know, however you do this, we're trying to create a nice development where it's not going to have a lot of traffic going through it, but ignoring the fact that there already is a lot of traffic going through it there. This is my concern on that part there. And if we look at this whole issue of how you cross the railway, I mean, I've always looked at this, and realistically, I think we're almost going to have a North Manydown and a South Manydown. I mean, I don't actually see there's any great need to, well, ideally there needs to be some way of getting a road across there, but not a major road anyway. But if we do the I think it's plot 6A, the Pack Lane Triangle in isolation, if you look at it on this plan, it just shows how isolated it will be from the north of Manydown. So I think you either got to, it's implicit the way we're going to design it, it will be anyway, because unless you can cover over the railway in the areas, you know, so you can actually access it by foot. I don't see, you know, it's such a major constraint, the railway. It's four rail lines at that point there, isn't it? You know, so it's not like it's even a single lane. That's enough of a problem in areas like Overton and Whitchurch, or even through Oakley, where it splits into two. But four together, whole road.
We policy fix. This is an actual policy. And I don't believe landowners, like ourselves, talking about land that we own, should be saying, oh, we'll reserve the right to whatever we apply our own policies. We should be saying significantly and firmly and clearly in this document, we will apply our policies in terms of social housing and affordable housing. Not we'll reserve judgment, a wishy-washy, weak-kneed approach to the whole issue. And I very firmly believe that that particular sentence waters down the commitment to social housing and affordable housing to a point where it is negligible. And therefore I would wish to change that statement to a very clear and firm one. Thank you. But apart from that, I've got nothing to say on this.
And obviously Richard can make a comment on both of you will already. I mean, obviously I endorse the sentiment of Councillor Keating for reasons that I think I've said time and again on this matter, but I mean, one of the things that we come up against in terms of planning applications, major developments elsewhere all the time in regard to this council's policy on affordable housing is developers saying we can't comply with council policy because it's not viable. It's not viable, we can't, I mean in simple language, we can't make enough money out of the development to provide the proportion of affordable housing socially rented. I'd like to think we might start talking about target rents in Basingstoke and its area in regard to the type of houses we provide. But I've said this before, I know, but forgive me, but if ever there is an opportunity for us to provide, consistent with our own policy, the type of affordable, socially rented housing which we say we want to provide in Basingstoke, Manydown must be the opportunity. And it just seems to me, and I think consistent with what Councillor Keating has said, we want to start as we mean to go on, I think, in this regard. And I would have thought that rather than, and I understand the implications, by the way, of SIL and Section 106 with all the sort of new constraints that are applying to that, but even at this stage, I think we can be much firmer in our commitment in principle as landowners, joint landowners, to say this is what we are seeking to achieve. And it will take an awful lot to deflect us from that in regard to the way that we develop Manydown and the contracts we negotiate with those people who are going to build the houses for us. And I think this is the time to say it. And say it as soon as we can, keep to it, and we'll adjust our position if we have to regarding the changes that are going to occur under SIL and Section 106. But let's start as we mean to continue, please.
Okay, thanks, Councillors Keating and Potter. And I know we've discussed this in the past, but for the record, this is a response to a planning document. Before I take you through why we've worded it and the way we've worded it in response to that planning document, I draw your attention to further up in that paragraph. It's probably about fourth or fifth line down, where we say the original position is restated that, namely that there remains a need for a fuller consideration of all types of affordable housing. And that is, and thresholds in respect to Manydown, that is absolutely our position in terms of how we want to take the development forward. Unfortunately, the planning discussion is quite constrained, and it's constrained on two levels. It's constrained on deliverability and viability because at the EIP, the inspector will specifically ask us, Manydown landowners, whether this is deliverable and viable in the context of all the policies that are in the local plan, including which is the affordable housing policy. And we would have to produce evidence one way or another in relation to that at a pure planning level, not at a deliverability level, which is which is why I drew your attention to that first statement, because that's where we're going in terms of delivering Manydown, looking at all types of affordable housing. So at the planning level, and as a response to the planning issue, we've got to deal with the deliverability and viability in order to get the allocation of Manydown into the local plan, because the inspector will request that evidence in relation to all policies, including the affordable housing policy. And the second point that you drew attention to, Councillor Potter, was the SIL and the 106, which links to the 40%, which is a planning-specific issue, and again, it requires a very planning-specific response. So, in this context, please take heart from the words earlier up in the paragraph that both joint landowners, that's ourselves and Hampshire, and I think we discussed this in our trip to Banbury, both myself and Tony Davidson, are committed to looking at all forms of affordable housing and different thresholds when we get to looking at how we can actually implement Manydown post the local plan allocation.
Sorry, Councillor Keating, it's still on this point, I take it.
Yes. I have little sympathy with the planning arrangements in relation to this. The reality is London has got a policy of 50% affordable housing. Other local authorities across the nation have got large proportions of 50% social housing or affordable housing. You could have one variation of affordable housing and you could have 14 other variations and still end up with 10%. The reality is consideration of all affordable housing types. I'm not interested in types of social housing. I'm interested in our commitment as a council to deliver at least 40% of the total. Now, I'm not suggesting I'm totally prepared to ignore planning rules, because that would be daft. But if you have planning rules which are supposed to implement planning policy, and the planning policy currently in Basingstoke says 40%, I would expect you as an officer, genuinely, I'd expect you as an officer, and you as a cabinet member, to say, we are committed to complying with those planning policies. Policies, not aspirations, or not a particular type of affordable housing, actual planning policy. Now, if we own Manydown and we say to developers, you can develop that bit of land to build 400 houses or however many, and we say to them initially, and you must have 40% social housing. If they can't do it, you can say goodbye. You can say get another developer. That's where we are with this, because currently we are failing repeatedly to insist that developers provide what we have policies that they should provide. We're failing. And I don't believe we should endorse that failure by this weak need, maybe if it suits, or, you know, this is a policy. We should actually commit to it in this document, because we've already committed to it in other policies.
Thank you, Councillor Keating. As a council policy of 40% affordable, as public owner of the land, we are clearly going to take note of this, and it's going to be a high priority. But equally, as landowners, we have a responsibility to ensure that we are able to come forward with a sound and viable scheme, particularly in the early years when we're trying to get the development going at Manydown. And therefore, in the context of work that's still to be done and issues that have not been resolved in relation to Section 106 and SIL, I would hope that you would understand that we have to, that there has to be an element of preserving of our position as landowner without in any way moving away from council policy for affordable housing in the borough.
Thank you. Councillor Tucker.
Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't going to sleep, I promise. When I was reading through the whole of this big thing, I kept thinking, where's the community centre going to go? Where's the community going to go? And then I just found a little bit whereby some of the development within the little centres could possibly be used for something like that. But I am really concerned that is really, really important for a development of this nature, as we saw when we went to Banbury, how they had managed to get somewhere to use as a community centre. So I just wanted to mark that one up, that don't let it get forgotten in the back anywhere. Another thing on a different subject, this vision job that we have, that's going to be published, isn't it? Is that right? The vision?
That's correct, Councillor Tucker. It's obviously on the public domain now. It went out to the internet, and it's a draft vision. and a draft master plan, and they'll remain draft. They are planning documents. They'll remain draft through the process that we're going to go through in relation to the local plan, and then get submitted to the inspector for local plan as part of our evidence.
No.
Oh, sorry, we're a bit slow in this area. I am. 92 of 104, which is CT2 neighbourhood centre. The first sentence doesn't really make sense. I think they're either in the wrong order, but the wording is a bit weird. It says these centres form the heart of the all other neighbourhoods. Is that okay? Now, a general query that I got confused, which I'm easily confused. When I started looking at this lovely pipeline that we have, and I was trying to work out the width of how much is actually not allowed to be developed apart from sort of things like footpaths and the odd road and things. Could you confirm the actual width that is actually not developable, because it worries me the amount of space there is there?
Well, at this stage, we're still undertaking some investigations with the people that look after the pipelines on behalf of the government. And so what we've assumed is that we wouldn't actually put any housing development on top of the pipelines. We'd situate it within a way leave that's acceptable to the HSSE, and that we wouldn't locate any activities or centres of high population like nursing homes or schools in the very close vicinity of the pipelines. But actually I have to say that we're still undertaking those investigations with the people that look after the pipelines. We understand one of the pipelines is disused, and we're trying to get through the process with those representatives to understand whether or not those assumptions that we've made so far do actually need to be taken into account in reality. In other words, we think that what we've assumed so far is probably a worst case scenario, and therefore we think as we get further into those investigations with the pipeline representatives that things could be a little bit easier for us to plan around.
One of the pipelines actually goes through my land, and I've lived there for 30 years, and I've never ever seen anybody checking it, so I assume that that is probably the one that is no longer used. I mean, that's only circumstantial, but I can't believe it, and I've never been told not to do anything in that particular field.
I think the phrase circumstantial is very relevant in this in this particular issue. What we've done so far is absolutely locate where those pipelines are, so we know exactly in geographical terms where they are. We've now got to go to the next phase and understand exactly what's going on.
Sorry, there was just one thing. The gentleman who spoke referred to the woodland and, couldn't it all be reversed, etc., but he hasn't had any kind of response. Could somebody respond to that? Because there is a very good reason. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Tucker. The woodland itself, which if we look at, I guess, go to page 23, just because I've got that one open, apologies, on the master plan, the URS master plan. And you will see to the north the dark green and the kind of, well, both sets of green to the north of the Manydown development. All of that area in green, sort of dark green, and that sort of more sort of lighter shade of green north of the Manydown site is a covenanted land, and the legal covenant that was in the deeds of transfers when both councils bought the land specified that no development should be placed on that land, and therefore we have taken the proactive step of looking at putting a country park on that covenanted land. So unfortunately we're not able to, under the deeds of covenant, we're not able to build any houses or any form of infrastructure across that deed of covenant land.
Thank you, Councillor Keating.
I know you'll be surprised that I want to talk about social housing again. I now want to propose an alteration to the paragraph 3.44, bullet point number 1, last sentence. And that it should be replaced by another last sentence which says, words to the effect that the landlords are committed to the provision of 40% affordable housing as per the local plan.
I think at this stage, that as I was indicating earlier, whilst we're waiting for responses to our technical questions, that's not something that I can actually verify that it can be achieved right now, and therefore we have to work through the process and justify the development in terms of its deliverability and viability off the back of responses we're going to get from the consultants.
Can I come in there? I don't think this is necessary, really, but I suppose my question would be, is this the view of the committee as a whole? I know it's your view. I know it's your view, Councillor Keating, but I was wondering whether the other members of the committee are persuaded that what we have here is the right balance, given that I've explained to you that we understand perfectly well that Council's policy is 40% affordable housing. But if there is a view expressed by the committee, then of course I will take it to the MEC. But I need to know whether it's a view of the committee as a whole, I suppose.
I mean, obviously, again, supporting Councillor Keating, it just seems to me, I mean, in terms of trying to put the landowner hat on in the way that we hear, in another committee on which I sit, developers saying various things about, the viability of site, but we often are able, I know we're not in a position of talking about safe policies, but, developers, I think, understand what the local authority is seeking to achieve in terms of affordable housing. And sometimes, I mean, within the sort of pre-app stuff that we go through, we are able to get developers to say, yes, of course, in principle, we understand what the council is requiring and we are committed in principle to that. Once we get into the planning process proper, when we start to develop the site, with all of the inhibitors that go with that, we may talk to you again. But it seems to me at this juncture, as landowners on this very important site, it would not be unreasonable for us to say that is our commitment in principle. And it's subject to all the constraints that Richard is talking about, of course. And it's subject also to the implications of SIL Section 106, which are changing by the day and are yet to become clear to everybody. I think we would accept that, but the position in principle surely is one that we could state fairly unequivocally at this stage without it being an embarrassment to anybody.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. There's a few hands gone up. I know Councillor Tilbury had his hand up and Councillor Leake as well. Rather than having a lengthy debate on this, because we've still got a little way to go on the paper, can we simply just put this to the vote? We'd be happy to put that vote. Councillor Keating, do you have a form of words to substitute for the sentence that you wanted to change? Would you like to repeat it, please? Yeah. Yes, please.
So what is that? Yeah. That the last sentence of paragraph 3.4.4 bullet point number 1 should be removed and replaced with a new last sentence which reads, the landowners are committed to the provision of 40% affordable housing as per the local plan. If I make a comment, I do not see this particular piece of land the same as any other piece of private land, where you go to the developers and say, oh, please do 40%. If we can't insist on what our policies are on land that we own, there is no point in owning it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keating. I believe that's supported by Councillor Potter. Okay. If we can put it to the vote then. Those in favour of changing the sentence as per the suggestion of Councillor Keating, if you'd like to raise your hands, please. So that's 4. And those against. And that's 4 as well. I'm afraid in this instance I will then use my casting vote as chair to go with the status quo as per the paper as stands at the moment. Well, as per the officer recommendation then. Thank you. Thank you. If we can then move on to Appendix 1, which is page 17 of 104, and also the supplementary report, which we all have here. Are there any points on the comments to changes that we haven't already captured, or any questions that anyone has?
Would you be kind enough to repeat that? I was just...
Yes, apologies. The supplementary paper, we're looking at the supplementary paper that you should hopefully have, John. Does everyone have a supplementary paper? This one here, yes. Does anyone need an extra one? Thank you. Do we have any extra? Yes, page 10. Yes. Yes, we're looking at page 10 in the report, and we're also looking at the supplementary paper, which is here, which hopefully you all have a copy of now. Does everyone know where we are now? Councillor Keating's still up.
Perhaps I can say why, if I may. I've got the supplementary paper, and Appendix 1 starts on page 10 of bundles, not page.
If I may, Councillor Keating, yes, that was my mistake. The officer has told me it's from page 10 rather than page 17 or whatever I said. So are there any questions or any comments on these pages that we haven't already covered?
Assuming I've now caught up, sorry, assuming if I haven't, quickly tell me, but it's only the strange, this is 17 of 104, isn't it? Is that right? Yes? Oh. Okay. Oh, okay, sorry, I beg your pardon. Sorry, Richard, you're right, I do beg your pardon. Okay. The point I was going to make, sorry, in respect of subsection A, is that still right? You know, okay, sorry, forgive me. In terms of the number of dwellings, which is clearly a change from the original 3,080, I think, we're now up to 3,400. And again, in terms of clarification, the proposal is that will be our suggested change in regard to those things that we say as the landowner for submission into the consultation process of the local plan, isn't it? Is that right? And also in terms of the timetable, and the two things are related, we're now talking about 2017 as against the original timescale of 2019. Is that right as well? Okay. And the two things interrelate, of course they do, really. And I just wanted to be absolutely sure, because I'm excited by that, but also I just want to be clear that that is realistic, really, in regard to what officers are saying. That's the only point I wish to make.
Yeah, I think the point just to make on the timetable is 2017-18 is when we would hope to obtain planning permission by. towards the end of 2016, so that we can begin preparing the land in 2017 and 2018. There will be a phase of around about a year to 18 months where infrastructure and earthworks and land preparation will need to happen. So just so that we're clear that we're not looking to build the first house or have the first house built in 2017 and 18. There's going to be a phase of preparation of the land to get to a point where we can then start constructing. But the timescales that are quoted there are within the local plan period are then compatible with the figures that are referred to in Clause A.
Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Chair. I was struck really by the definite nature of going from approximately to at least. Could we not have at least 40% in the other part of the document as well? I mean, it really is striking that when you want to promote something, it is not approximately, there's no caveats, we will have at least 400. By the way, I agree with 400. I have no difficulty with it. But it also means that there is no you're not allowing for any possibility of underachieving, are you?
Can I respond to that? I've never doubted the tenacity of Councillor Keating. And you've made your point on affordable housing, I've noted. But the other thing I'd make is that clearly Manydown and bringing Manydown forward is inextricably tied to passing the local plan. So I do hope that on Thursday, when push comes to shove, that the opposition parties will support the local plan, because without it, we are going to be left with some uncertainty about how we take Manydown forward.
I mean, as a member of one of the opposition parties, obviously we may take our lead from members of the cabinet, so we'll see how it goes on Thursday.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to raise an issue just over the page on page 11 of 104, item O, about encouraging non-car transport. And I think if we want this development to be an exemplar, then we do want to encourage people as they move into their new homes to develop good transport habits. And once people get into the habit of driving somewhere because there is no bus, it's much harder to get them to then take up a bus route when it's eventually provided. So I do think that including public transport from the outset is a good thing to include, and I would like to see that maintained because that does establish people's pattern of movements, which are much harder then to alter.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Leake.
I'm a little lost, actually. Could somebody explain to me? I'm looking at this schedule, which, if I take, the only ones, as you know, that I'm really interested in are MN and O. Where it says officer comment remains as outlined in the report. Are you saying, therefore, that although this has been revised by Cabinet, your comments remain as set out in the original report?
Just switch your thing.
Oh, I think.
Yeah, just so we're absolutely clear, if you look at page 11 of 104, and I think so, we're on the, and you've got the supplementary report. M is, yeah, M for mother is absolutely that. So the comments that we put in the page 11 of 104 remains, even though the clause M has been redrafted, what we've said on page 11 of 104 remains as stated. So we're not changing that comment that we put in.
Could you therefore just explain to me what is the implication of your comment with regard to the changed policy written by or prepared by Cabinet or recommended by Cabinet? How do you disagree with what Cabinet has actually said?
We're just, if you go to page 11 of 104, we're just suggesting that the additions of the word single carriageway, we could debate whether we put the word link in, given your earlier comments, Councillor Leake, but that's something we'll take away after your earlier comments. But we are just suggesting to add the definition of single carriageway in there. Yeah, so N is a new clause, so that clause N on page 11 of 4 has now been moved to clause O in the redrafted Cabinet changes. So N, you need to go to the supplementary report, so N for November, and that is a totally new clause, and we're as I said earlier, we're just saying we really need to add in the words long-term in front of master planning in both instances that the word master planning has been mentioned, because in another comment we're making around the allocation map, which is in the body of papers here, we're saying that actually the cross-hatched area that's out with of the local plan allocation needs to be redefined as area for longer term master planning. So we're just making it very clear that there's a connection there between clause N for November and that pink cross-hatched land out with of the allocation area. And then clause O for Oscar on the supplemental report was a redraft of what was then clause N for November on page 11 of 4, and we've added some additional comments in the supplemental report as to how we intend to respond during the local plan consultation. So really you should be looking at the supplemental report, page 4, for those comments, because that now gives you an indication of how we're intending to respond to that redrafted clause O now, that's going to be presented to Council on Thursday night.
Councillor Leake, are you coming back on that at all, or did you? Shall we move on and come back if necessary? In which case?
Can I just
yes,
sorry.
Of course, yes.
When it says to prevent rat running through existing communities, which existing communities?
That second column is the local planning redraft. That's not our redraft. So the column that you're referring to there has been.
Could somebody tell me which are the existing communities to which this, perhaps the portfolio holder could answer this one. When it refers to rat running through existing communities, which communities, to which communities do you refer?
Well, given that I was not participant in that, I was not at Cabinet, who I'm excluded by virtue of my position as portfolio holder and member of the MEC, I can't answer that. I think we need to speak to portfolio holder for planning.
Well, I was wondering whether it included Wootton St Lawrence.
Lawrence, yes, I was thinking that.
I shall have to speak to him, obviously. Thank you for the advice. I'm sorry so few members of the Cabinet knew anything about it.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
I mean, I listened avidly to the cabinet meeting. I could probably give you some indication of what they were referring to, but I won't. I mean, they can speak for themselves, obviously. But I just wanted to be, can I just ask, Richard, in terms of the definition of long term, I mean, it's probably likely I won't see it at the end of the local plan period anyway, but what do you mean by long term in this regard? I mean, it could be anything, but do you have a defined period that you're talking about? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Potter. I do, and probably it's easier if we go to the plan on page 60 of 104, which is the one I was referring to earlier in answering questions from Councillor Leake. And what I'm referring to is the land that is cross-hatched in pink, that's out with of the allocation, the site allocation, the local plan period. And I'm just making the point really by using the words long term that it's outside of the local plan period and therefore beyond 2029 in that pink allocated period, pink hatched.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions, comments? Councillor Tilbury.
On Part B, the diversity of dwelling types, self-build, well, particularly self-build, it's supported in principle but has not been defined, it says in here. But I think unless we're looking at doing self-build, I don't see who else is going to do it. It's in the MPPF as something that everyone thinks is a good idea, but as all the land is owned by developers, all the sites are owned over it and are owned by or got an option to build on them, the only sites that are likely to come up are ones that we own, because no one else is going to give them up other than very small sites, and they tend to be building in someone's garden, which immediately brings them into conflict with the neighbours and all that sort of thing. I mean, that to me has been one of the big issues that we keep going on about is with Manydown is delivery. Is, you know, how can we get them to build more houses? Because the developers won't build at a rate that suits us. They will build at a rate that suits their profits. They're not stupid. That's the easiest way to make money is to drip feed houses on the market. That's what they're not building millions of houses at the moment, are they? It's they're making record profits on the smallest number of houses being built in living memory. That's the way it works. That's how you make loads of money. And the only people who are going to change that are self-builders or freeing up the land to other people, and if we don't do it, who else is going to do it? You know, we're the only people who control the land that doesn't have an option on it, because every other piece of land, running kennel farm, all of those, you got the builders are waiting to build on it. So, if not us, who?
Thank you, Councillor Tilbury. Yes, it's part of the stated concept, and I think it represents interesting opportunities. And I'm excited about what may be possible to enable people who want to self-build. And I think as public owners of the land, then we should see what we can do to make provision for this. Obviously, we need to make sure that it fits in with the overall guidelines of how we envisage development taking place. I certainly agree with you that if it's all carved up and parcelled off to private developers, then the opportunities are likely to be lost. So something that perhaps we as a committee can work on in the ensuing months.
Thank you. Have we all raised any points or questions that we want to? Are we all done? Thank you. I'm just going to look at the portfolio holder. Do you have any final comments that you want to make at all?
No, as I thought it would be, it's been a useful session, and I'm grateful to members for the points that they've raised. We certainly don't have a monopoly of wisdom on this, and so I look forward to the sort of creative sparks continuing between us all and with our partners at HCC as we go forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, members. I think we've covered the recommendations as per the report, so thank you very much. And the meeting will close at 16:15. Thank you.